Well, as you see, Nancy's book is really, 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 really big. And they're like 45 chapters. No, 76 chapters. No, so what we thought tonight, Nancy and I have met. Okay. Nancy and I have met a few times over the past couple of months, and we've hit on a few about 5 or 6 topics which really resonated with Nancy and she wanted to expand on. So the way it's kind of going to go today is I will set up a situation. Nancy will give a brief reading from her book, and then we'll pull it to her discussion of the idea that's brought up from the. Okay?
Thank you, Constance. This is really my first time to do this, and I really feel like the PowerPoint just doesn't do it. So I really prefer to have some of the interactive type of audience where you can be part of my talk and I can be part of your thoughts. But because of the time limitation, I think what we decided to do is for us to do what Constance suggested, and we'll reserve the question at the end, if that's okay with you. But if you feel like so urgent that you must ask the question right there, then just raise your hand and that's okay too. All right.
So the situation is this: after, in the late 40s, shall we say, in the late 40s, Nancy's parents were farmers from the 𝗠men area, and they were having a hard time. And they moved to Taipei. At that point, there was all kinds of building going on and not much infrastructure. And she and her parents lived in a tent city between the construction that was going on. And it was a really hard life. It was very, very tough. But then the family back in 𝗠men had some problems. And it was decided that a debt need be paid. And that debt was paid by the selling of Nancy. Childhood.
Okay, so I will start reading from some of the chapters. Okay, so this is about the new girl, after I was sold at $100 US dollars from one family to the other. So this is kind of what I thought. I do not recall shedding any tears after I found out that I was not going to see my parents again once I left the big, huge house. I can only guess that my fear was overtaken by a keen sense of survival, a defense I learned in my days in a tent city. I imagine that it must have felt like I was trying to prepare for a fight by finding my footing in the thick layers of cloud. Unfortunately, my adopted family, the Chens, lack of preparation to welcome a young child into their family, further bolstered my defense mechanism. It felt as though it was me alone against the world. I learned from the age of 5 that if I choose to live, I need to trust my own instincts and live the best life I could. It was a lonely road, but from it, my survival instinct also, you will imagine, clouded my ability to trust anyone for a long, long time.
And how do you think that structured or affected the way you perceive your relationships with others?
Well, I think that when you're a child, people who understand from the ego development of a young child, age 5 is pretty kind of in a borderline of when you're trying to kind of establish yourself, the foundation, the roots. And when you don't have that roots and that foundation, it's kind of, I guess in my view, it was kind of pretty amazing in a lot of ways that I was able to kind of determine whether or not I was going to live or die, right? I mean, it would be easier. I just jump off the bridge or into the well and drown and that's it. But once I decide that I was going to live, I had to figure out how to do that. So, but then at the same time, I was thinking about that quite a way. Even today, I was thinking about my family, my father, right? And I would say, and this is kind of raw emotion, where I think about my father was my lover, my protector, my provider, and also the guy in light. But I was supposed to be loved and we're loved by him. But then I felt so betrayed after, when he, allowed me to be sold. So that I lost quite a lot of security in a sense. I did not have the foundation. I did not know what I was doing in a lot of ways. And it was very difficult for me to trust people, because I was so, I don't know how to say it, if I couldn't trust my father, who could I really trust in a way?
So you do feel that this affected your relationships, particularly with men?
Yes, I think so. And I think that, and maybe later on we talked a little bit about it because my grandmother, my adopted grandmother, who was a devoted Buddhist, had taught me quite a bit about love deeply and give freely, in that kind of mode. And so on one hand, I was trying to trust everybody, but on the other hand, I couldn't because of what happened to my father. But the thing about it from a psychological perspective is that, somehow, it's a pattern, right? So you formulate my view of a man just like my father. I had I guess the four men in my life, right? My first marriage and the psychologist I lived with for 7 years, and then now my husband of 40 years. And I had this image about this man just like my father, the lover, the provider, the protector, and also my guiding lights. But then in each one of these cases, somehow, because of my experiences, I guess you're going to have to read a book to know that here I go again. It's some of the betrayal. It was pretty difficult in a sense.
But you were part of a family. You were part of the Chen family. You were the new Chen girl. And you said that your adopted mother, didn't spend a lot of time with you. You were very much on your own when you were first entering into this new family as a chambermaid, basically. But then you got to go for Chinese New Year to the Chen family home. And Chinese New Year is about unity, about family, about coming together. And in your book, you talk about meeting a very important person. Can you tell us about Grandma Chen?
Yes. So, it's kind of, I guess it's kind of interesting how that is, right? So I guess what I'm going to read is about when first time I met Grandma Chen. Constant talking about the family unit. But the fact was that in a lot of ways, I feel like, it wasn't really quite the way that the normal people would call it as a family unit, right? So I would say that perhaps some of the talk that I had is, I would say, because of my survival instinct, I created this bubble. Mm-hmm. This bubble that constantly asks me, there's a chart, I say step by step, how do you get there? So I created this bubble, and within a bubble, that would allow me to dream a lot. So my dream about a family is always this rainbow, right? The glass is always half full, right? But of course, during that period of time, that was my life. And so the family was viewed that way. But in fact, in reality, life is not like that. It's not all, peachy trees and loaded with the rainbows and all that. So through my lifetime, especially the later part of my life, is like the bubble burst. And so then I finally have to face the reality. So that is another different path, another experience. So anyway, so I want to go back to how the foundation was. It was that now, if you don't know about the Chinese folk religion, there's a lot of superstition, and my grandmother was a very devoted folk religion. And so she was a spiritual leader of the rice community in Taoyuan, which is southern part of Taipei. So I learned a lot about superstitions, because of her. But at the same time, she taught me about the humanity of things, And so that's kind of where this passage came about when I first met her. As a petty cat came to stop, we were greeted by Grandma Chen, Ama. She was a small-framed woman in a dark blue, typical Taiwanese pantsuit. Her black hair was woven into a bun, just above the neck of her neck. She wore a pair of closed slippers. And when Grandma Chen embraced me, I noticed that her eyes was closed and she was totally blind. But her face glowed like the radiant shine, like the rising sun. Her arm was strong and her hug was full of a gentle warmth. I remember in that moment, I felt an emotional connection with her. It was a feeling that I belonged there and that an empty space was being filled. It was almost as though Grandma Chen had been reunited from a previous life. Smoldering teardrops fell from my eyes, and I was unsure if they were the expression of joy or. So that's kind of how I connected. There's one hand about, creating the bubble, and I think that emotional connection with the grandma kind of helped me to boost that feeling of somewhat of belonging, but still within the bubble. Yeah.
What about her connection to her community? What effect did that have on you? Your Grandma Chen's connection with her community?
I have to say that I left Taiwan when I was 14 years old, and I was with the Chen family from age 5 to 14. And I would have to say during the 9 years of my life, I learned quite a bit from the Taoyuan.
They said that this one has a problem
with a Taoyuan community. And really, the farmers gave me such a sense of humanity in that they work hard, they labor themselves, and yet I think that they were the happiest people on earth. I never heard them complaining about anything, and they embraced me as one of them. And I think that from the book, you'll read that why the connection, about me bringing a gift. And a gift was for me to save up all the old newspapers and go to Grandma's house. And at night, we will have candles outside with a wooden bench and under the stars. And I will be reading this old newspaper about old news. But they were so happy because they didn't know any difference. And it was that connection with this group of people that gave me a sense of humanity that I was somebody that was worth the living. And that kind of set the foundation for me, I think.
Well, and what about creativity? We've spoken before, and you spoke about this time in the grandmother's home of a time where you discovered creativity.
The creativity. Okay. So, so I talked about the bubble, right? So from age of 5 to 14, 9 years, I feel like I was growing up in a world of silence because I did not have any friends in school because everybody was afraid to find out. And I guess we haven't talked about my mother, Grace, which I will read a passage. But my mother was a sex worker. She earned her money, U.S. dollars, by entertaining the merchant marines and U.S. military men during that period of time in the 1950s and 60s. And that's why she made so much money, because it was the U.S. dollar. So it was kind of one of those unspoken moments that I was not allowed to have any friends over or talk about it in school because it's a 面子, right? The shame, right, about that. So I didn't have any friend. I did not have a lot of people to talk to. So it's all silence, during the 9 years of silence. So then the bubble allowed me then to storage up stories. I'm trying to constantly create this all wonderful story about life. And in a way, my grandmother's farmers the farming community kind of provided me a lot of material to kind of dream up all these different stories. And I think that's kind of where my creativity is kind of started to develop, was that, yeah.
Okay, well, you've mentioned her briefly. Taiwan has a complicated history with sex work. We have the legacy of the Japanese comfort women. Then we have legalized prostitution that happened with the influx of hundreds of thousands of soldiers in 1949 with the KMT. We're not judging. Okay? Let's hear a little bit about Grace, and then let's share some of your feelings.
Okay, so I'll just read a little bit about this. Okay, so I do not remember where Grace took me after we returned to Taipei. Now, the counselor mentioned about, the first time about me going to the Chen's family in a farm with grandmother celebrate Chinese New Year's, and that was the first time that I participated in a family event. So Grace took me. So I said, I do not remember where Grace took me after we returned to Taipei from Grandma Chen's temple home. Perhaps to one of her friends who I stayed with before. After we returned to Taipei, Grace went back to her role as a substitute wife and sometimes a bar girl. I would see her on an occasional visit when she brought new seasonal clothing, fresh American apples, and chocolate bars from the military PX stores. These were gifts from and sometimes special requests she made to her American servicemen. I always look forward to these treats. Now that I like to think that was her way of showing affection toward her servant daughter, but I don't remember how I felt at that time. Perhaps her extended absence had numbed my longing for connection with a woman who said she wanted to be my mother. So how do I feel about that?
Well, as a child, you've written in your book, as a child, you were simply very isolated. You were just pushing your way through, right? You were in your bubble creating your own life. Mm-hmm. As an adult now, I guess my question is, when you decided to write this book, did you run into conflict about actually addressing these topics head on?
Okay, so, it's kind of complicated, we may be all of it if we have time to talk about it. So, I did not think about really writing this book, during that period of time, I stored up a lot of story, as I said before. And the thing that helped me to go through that nine years was I was very, very lucky in school, because during the 1950s, girls don't generally get to go to school. And this, I had to thank the Kuomintang when they came over in 1949. The government policy at the time was that every child at the school age will go to school. And so I was one of those lucky ones. I got to go to elementary school. So can you imagine when you button up so long and then you go to school? Then I used to write a lot. So I would write poetry, I would write short stories. And thank God I have a teacher who really appreciate that. And so they really encouraged me to write. But at the same time, I was really good at math. So I had a really great math teacher that was almost like my mentor, anyway, in a male figure. And so I was doing really well in school, but again, I was not allowed to have friends. So even though I was doing really well and having a lot of achievement, but I had always have to kind of celebrate in solitude, because my adopted family never kind of come and really congratulate me or say everything is fine, you did great or anything. So achievement at a time become kind of the obligation rather than really achievement. When I did excellent, that's just the obligation. I'm supposed to do it, and if you don't do it, then you're worthless. So as a result of it, I never really learned how to accept compliments for a long time. at 74 years old today, I'm just learning how to defrost my own feeling about when people say, you're really good, wonderful, you're amazing. And for the first time in my life, I'm starting to feel like, wow, maybe they are really right. Thank you. So it took me a long time.
But in your book, you talk about these amazing teachers that you had.
Yeah.
And they started with your elementary school teachers here on Taiwan.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, well, so we've gone from 5 to 9. Then you're going into junior high school.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're going into junior high school. You're making even greater strides, aren't you? Tell us a little bit about what happened when you were in junior high school here in Taiwan.
In junior high school, as you know, what you want me to talk about?
Oh,
My first month. Okay. So, so you talk about teenage girls, right? So I was never allowed to have friends. So there's a chapter in there that I'm talking about a boy called Ming, M-I-N-G, and that was his last name. And, people would say, oh my gosh, he was your first love or your first boyfriend, right? But the fact was, I was not allowed to. But anyway, somehow one of my so-called school friends came and said, let's come with me. We're going to go to Xiangshan, to go and hike. So come with us. And anyway, so we told a white lie. She told a white lie. And so we went, and it was this boy thought I was the greatest thing on earth, And anyway, so I think it was lasted for 2-3 months before my mother says, we're going to the United States, So of course broke my heart and broke his heart, and he promised that he was going to join the merchant marine. So he's 18 years old, and he was going to America to rescue me and marry me and happy ever after. And so I think that was a shining light in a way that I kind of starting to discover a little bit about caring and loving some sort. Of course, that did not last long because I couldn't really feel it, and that's one thing about young child, and we can talk about it later too, is that, if you read the book, I'm also a trained clinician. I did clinical social work, and I did practice some therapy, as a therapist. And now I lost my thought.
Talking about your ability to have feelings.
Yes.
Ability to...
Yes. Okay. So, yes. And I think that's kind of the difficult part is and I'm so happy that you're here, and, there's no sugarcoating about anything. I just have to tell you that after 74 years in my life, the first time I feel that I can defrost. And what does that mean? I froze. I froze my feeling for the longest time because that was the best defense mechanism that I had through my experiences of being hurt. And, the thing about it is, even though I did not trust anybody for a long, long time, but in a way, I was so kind of blame trust. I trust anybody. So kind of opposite, that kind of thing, And so I got hurt quite a bit here and there. And so this is the first time that I'm starting to, in fact, I think it's the work that I've been doing for quite a few years. I started this year, right? Starting to defrost and to really go through about how do I really feel about that. So it's a bubble that I created. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, first. Yeah. Well,
thank you. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Grace. Because when you were 14, after your first boyfriend, first love affair with Ming, success in school, you were told you were going to America.
Yes. Yes.
And did you have any input? Could you say anything about it?
No, actually, it was quite interesting. I don't know if that's one of our things here to talk about it. The number 4, right? Okay. So, okay, I can talk about that. I mean, I can read through it. But basically what happened was, my birth name is 𝗖𝗺, right? And my family name was Lai. But then when I was bought by Grace's family name was Chen. But I'm very grateful that she never really changed my 𝗖𝗺. China never changed that. And I'm very, very grateful. And I don't know if you know about naming in Taiwan is kind of really important. I mean, people spend a lot of money trying to get people to figure out what your name should be because that kind of set the path for what your life is going to look like. And 𝗖𝗺 is kind of very unique and special. 𝗖 meaning water, which is the ocean, and yin is a cloud, which is the heaven. So you match the heaven and the water, you kind of balance the yin and yang, and you're supposed to be really, really special, right? But I never really knew that until pretty recent, right? But what really threw in the monkey wrench was that when we went to the United States, I didn't know, actually, I really didn't know when my birthday was or whatever, but went through the immigration, we had the passport says Nancy 𝗂𝗺𝗃. I'm going, whoa, who is that? And my birthday was April 2nd. Really? So that was in 1964. So I was 14 years old, and I got stuck with the name, with the Nancy 𝗂𝗃. So when my mother married the first time to the merchant marine was an older gentleman. And if you read my book, you'll know what happened. And that it was just a kind of way for her to get to America. Yes, thank you. And so anyway, their agreement was simple. Mr. 𝗂𝗃 must adopt me so I can accompany Grace. I was her designated lifetime chambermaid, and now apparently I'm the English translator. I was much too valuable to leave behind. Actually, it was a great moment when I first learned the day of my birthday, which I never known before. But it was listed in our joint passport, April 2nd, 1950. I couldn't be sure it was my real birthday or not, but I accepted because this official document says so. Then above the little number that determined my date of birth, a thin, clean Roman print was written, Nancy 𝗂𝗃. Confused, I was too afraid to ask if Nancy was indeed me. Was this to be my new identity? It must be so, I thought. My picture was there on our passport, besides a detail confirming who we were.
So that starts your adventure in America. And at this point, you're 14 years old, and you're going to go to high school. Where did your family live?
We live in San Jose, California.
And it was a multi-generational family, wasn't it?
Yes. And it was a 𝗂𝗃 family. And, it was I have to say, I really count my blessing in every way. Even though as difficult as it was, somehow in my life, I always have somebody there sort of to be like my guardian angel of some sort, And Grandma 𝗂𝗃, and you'll see her picture in the book, is a blonde, white-haired woman. But she was the sweetest woman I ever seen. And so we went to stay with her and her family with my aunt, her daughter, for the first year of our time in the United States. And then that's where I registered for high school. I did not have to repeat a year. I was lucky to go to high school. And that's where I learned how to speak English. And I think I recall, and then she was great. She would take me to the grocery store. And of course, if you know the American supermarket, I mean, one aisle you can find like 200 different kind of cereals. Okay, and then so she would go through every single one of them and introduce to me, and then to repeat the names and all that stuff. And I think one thing that I feel somewhat at home was she believed in hanging her clothes sun dry. She has a washing machine and she has a dryer, but she only used the washing machine. And then she would put her clothes in the backyard and she would hang them out just like we do here in Taiwan. So I think that was kind of a comfort, a connection that I have kind of remained to be connected with Taiwan. And then she would teach me all the flowers and stuff. But I think the most memorable was that she introduced me to Lawrence Welk. If you know anything in America, Lawrence Welk was one of those biggest, shows in ballroom dancing, and so I learned quite a bit from that in terms of English, but a bit about the culture. Yeah.
Now, what was Grace, your adopted mother, going through at this time?
My mother, she actually, at the end, I wrote pretty much in a book, and of course, the last 5 years or so, I would kind of make that, and because I never really lived with her from day one. Grace never really got used to being an American. She never became an American citizen, and she never really learned how to speak English. She pretty much isolated herself. And so, I don't know, she cursed me quite a bit. I think, I really didn't know until 6-7 years ago when I came back to Taiwan, and after she passed away, and her brother gave me my birth certificate when I can go and find my birth parents. At the same time, her brother gave me the sales agreement, if you will. And in the agreement, he said that Grace, my mother, will promise that I will get education. And that was my father's sort of condition, that I will still receive education. Where my mother, my adopted mother, will be the sole person that would decide if I get married and who I get married to. So I think the curse came from that. As soon as I got 18 and I went to I went to college, and I met my first husband at 16, and I got married at 19, and she felt that she was betrayed by me. And so the curse was like, I curse you will never ever be happy. So that was that. And so our relationship was never really kind of that good in terms of mother and daughter relationship, because we never had that.
But you did have a really good time there, though.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about your immigrant experience in high school.
If I may, you want me to talk a little bit about Grace, the result, yeah.
That's right before.
So I just want to read a little bit about that, because I want to have that closer, and then we can move to that. It should be so sorry. So as I talked about Grace that summer day, it was her funeral. It was a way for me to reframe the memory of her as someone who had given me so much. She was the catalyst in my test of will to live fully under the uneven waters of human drama. Her intended abandonment of me was ultimate test for me to find myself later on in spite of her actions. Our reconciliation during the last years of her life gave us both a sense of redemption, a way to complete our karma, the connection during this life. Her passing offered me the closure through forgiveness and self-compassion. This part of my journey with Grace was more than worthy to be one of Grandma Chen's life lessons. So I just feel like I would like to have that closure with Grace, and I think you can read it in the book, where I actually talked about her quite a bit, and I actually conducted her funeral service. That I did that all by myself, and I think that was very important to me.
Let's go back then. You started on this section talking about your entry into American life.
Yes.
And you entered into the family of the Cares, the family of the Marine, the merchant Marine that your mother had married, and you went to high school.
Yes.
You were living in California.
Yes.
Did you have mentors that took you under their wing?
Okay, so, yeah, I guess I don't have to do. Yes, and like I said before, I was always very fortunate to have a sort of guardian angel for me, you know. So when I went to high school, of course, I did not speak English much, and I was able to go into high school right away because of our Taiwanese educational system was so great in science and math, right? So I had to go and take a qualification test of some sort. So I passed the mathematics and the science, you know, with flying colors. We were Taiwanese education were way more advanced than what they learn in high school over there. But of course, when you come to history and literature and all that stuff, you know, of course, the English was a barrier. But they decided to go in and to have me continue in high school. And so I was putting into ESL. English is a second language. Fortunately, I had a wonderful teacher, Miss Murphy, and I just think that I call her my red-haired devil hero. You know, and that's after we Taiwanese or the Asians always think the Westerners have red-haired devils. She loved that kind of thing during that period of time. But I call her, you know, with sort of fondness, you know, because she was almost like, how do I call it, a mother figure to me. And she'd be sure that I took all the college required courses, working with the counselors and prepare me for SAT, ACT tests, and then be sure that I apply for all the colleges when they taught me. So I really am very grateful for her, and I was very lucky now.
What was different? When we spoke before, you talked about it being just an immigrant experience, a typical immigrant experience, but how yours was somewhat different. What were the differences in your immigrant experience?
What is the difference? Let me put it this way. I think every immigrant story has some similar experiences and some not, okay? So I can only speak from my experience of what I see in America, the observation, right? Most of the immigrants going to America, they always like to stay with their community, right? So if you are Hispanic, you go to and stay in a Hispanic community, the Jewish community, or a Taiwanese community or Asian community. Or in my case, I did not do that. I get thrown into the regular Caucasian neighborhood where there was no Asian whatsoever. However, I went to high school where the San Jose High School were primarily Hispanic. You know, a lot of Mexican-American family going there. And of course, very few Asians, you know. So on one hand, it was like isolation, you would go again. But on the other hand, you know, it kind of gave me motivation that I gotta get on with it. You gotta learn your English if you, make it. So that was a big difference because I did not get to live in my own community speaking my own language. So, that was a big difference.
In the book, there's a lot about your very, very close friends. But then there's a change in the dynamic with you and Grace, and she left her first husband, and you and she moved out to live on your own. And how did that change? Like your life?
So here we go again, right? I mean, if I can reframe it in some way, right? So you take in a 5-year-old who I thought I was so loved by my father, and I really think my father was God, beyond God, right? And then, of course, the betrayal, you know, how I felt. And I never really thought of that way until, this later point in my life. So I have always felt that I grew up pretty much alone, that I kind of took care of myself in that way, because if I was in a tent city with my birth parents, I pretty much fended for myself because they were working. They're busy working, trying to earn money all the time. And I really did not have a lot of time with them because they were always working. And with Grace, I never really get to live with her because she's always living with the American GIs and mercenaries. And I was always passing on from one family to the other, or a brother or an aunt somewhere. So, earlier we were talking about identity and roots, right? I never really had that true identity as who I was, even though the document says that thou shalt, you should 𝗯ance 𝗂𝗁, or you should be 𝗖liche or whatever. But the identity issue, because it stayed with me for a long time. And of course, because I didn't have roots. Mm-hmm. So that bubble I created this bubble to enable myself to somehow trying to establish that root. So I was very independent from very, very young age. So when I went to the United States, when I was 14 and I got thrown in this, and I say, well, geez, here I go again. So if I'm going to be here, I got to go and learn English and learn the way the Americans live. But of course, on the other hand, it's sort of that bittersweetness. The bitterness was like, well, if I'm going to do that, then I'm going to have to throw away all my Taiwanese, values and beliefs, and I'm going to be fully Americans, and I'm not Taiwanese. So, in a way, a lot of times, like during that period of time, I sort of try to separate myself from the Taiwanese and Chinese community, So how do I feel about that? I mean, I think that at that time I didn't really feel anything except survival. You gotta go do it or you're not gonna live, right? Yeah. So I went to high school. I had 3 jobs. Grace never was there. And I started working when I was 14 years old after school, and I earned my way. And even in college, I got a scholarship, but I still had to work 20 hours a week in a bookstore as a work-study program. So, I mean, the experience, as hard as was, but I feel like it gave me a sense of achievement in a way where I learned how to be independent and to fend for myself pretty early. But of course, the loneliness, comes in later. Yeah, how that was, because I thought she.
So we've got you up through high school, and then you go to college, and you get a scholarship, and you choose to go to University of California at Davis.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that adventure, that part of your education adventure.
Okay, I have to say my college life is probably one of my happiest times. Life. Of course, when I went to college, it was during the Vietnamese War, and I don't know how many of you gonna experience that. So of course, Grace, because she felt that I betrayed her by leaving, and so she wasn't gonna let me go, and so I was accepted by UC Berkeley, UCLA, University of San Francisco, and of course, UC Davis. I would have loved to go to Berkeley, but then the protest, it was pretty messy in Berkeley. So anyway, we were able to convince her that I was going to go to University of California at Davis. At a time when we called it the Cowtown because it was an agricultural school. And so I went. And I have to say that being away, 2 hours away from Grace, or from that environment where we first came, was a pretty good. It was a pretty good path for me in that I feel like I can finally live my own life the way it should be, and I start to make a lot of good friends, and we created this environment of and of in our own extended family in a way. Mm-hmm. So I made some very good friends there who are lifetime friends. I still have my college friends today, over 50-some years, So I learned quite a bit. And then I would tell you one of the kind of really enlightening story about why I have an Oriental language degree. I got to tell you about a story. And it's really history. It's a historical aspect. It was really funny. So because I work in a bookstore, so a lot of people, the professors, administration, and so I got lucky. So I get to know a lot of those department chairs and stuff. And one day, the Oriental language chair came over and said, guess what? I really need your help. And I say, oh, okay, my broken English, okay. He said, come and join this graduate school program. I have a group of graduate school students are trying to do their thesis on this particular Tang Dynasty emperor, and they really don't know what's going on because they don't know how to read classical Chinese. And I'm going, you really don't know classical Chinese either. She said, no, you gotta come. So anyway, I joined the group. And so I could read Chinese a bit, and then so we started to read this. Anyway, the whole thesis is about emperor in Tang Dynasty, and he maintained 2,000 concubines every year. And so they were trying to figure out what the heck is this 2,000 concubines? How could that ever happen? And of course, at the end, we understood that was the way that he formulated power, So by working with the warlord, getting their daughters to marry them and stuff. So he got the women at 16. And once you reach 22 years old, if you were able to born a son, you get to stay and they'll send you to the palace. And if not, you get sent back to the village and they can remarry. All right. But anyway, this whole tracking system of who's who was really interesting. So anyway, that was a fun part of that.
What are your other degrees in?
My other degree is really international economics. I was a business major. And an Oriental languages course. And my minor was in political science. And then later on, I was going to get an MBA, but I was in for my ugliness of the traumatic youth coming back. So I switched to clinical social work, because just the way I try to sort of heal myself. But the other part, I think that's what you're trying to get to. My college life was like happy because of my association with the farmers to understand their labor, their love for earth, and their humanity. I actually developed a sense of social activism where the Vietnam War was going on. And of course, my first husband at the time, or was a fiancé, went to Vietnam. And of course, he came home sick because of Agent Orange. And so here I am at a young age, had to take care of a sick husband. But anyway, what was really interesting about that was I participated in the Vietnamese War protests. I even lay in the railroad track in the middle of Davis, if you remember. And then 𝗖𝗺 I don't know how many of you guys will know about 𝗖𝗺, which is a labor movement leader in the United States that was advocating for the unionize the farm workers. And so I joined that, and I was pretty active in 𝗖𝗺, and we do the protests and all like boycotting the letters and grapes and all that stuff. And so that's where I kind of started my development of my social justice orientation even today, and that carries through all the way to today. Yeah. So those were the happy time. And of course, the cookings, the bakings, Yeah.
So after college, after becoming part of the activities of the 70s in terms of social movements, you entered the workforce. Well, what was your first job?
Okay, so I applied for King's Law School. When I graduated in 1972, that would be the first year of King's Law School. And I wanted to work for the United Nations and trying to get into the international policies. And so I applied for law school, and I was actually accepted as the first applicant to that law school. And I was kind of really excited about that until the government, civil service government came to campus to recruit for the top 10% of students. And they were offering presidential entrance program for 3 years. You start from the ground zero. 3 years later, you become a manager of some sort, and you get $10,000 per year. In 1972, it was a lot of money. So I said, okay, law school can wait. So I went to work for the United States Air Force as a civilian, as a financial analyst. because of my business background. That's where I got started. But of course, in the Air Force base in Sacramento, they repair airplanes, right? All the military airplanes. So here I am. I'm going, gee, so I'm imagining the military airplane. So I had to force myself to learn everything there is to learn about airplane, from the design of the airplane, the functionality of the airplane, to the repair process and all that stuff. And somehow I started getting into engineering. And I had no engineering degree whatsoever. Right.
Okay.
And so that's how I started my engineering career.
How long were you in the aeronautics?
I was in the airport for 16 years, but total in the aerospace for 42 years altogether.
42.
Yeah.
Were there many other women?
I have to say I was the first of the first to be hired under the Presidential Intern Program for the Air Force Base. I was always the only woman or woman of color in the ballroom. Now, can I tell this story about my trouble with General?
I think that's a word you get next to. There were some difficult times.
Yeah.
Let us know about the general.
Okay, so, like I said, I was always lucky, and the mentors and stuff. My career was always like with a lot of help, But this particular time, with the Air Force Base, the two-star general, which is the big boss, they get rotated every 3 years. So I think that was maybe like my third or fourth years on base, and I was already, the journeyman, the GS-11, and I was on the way to GS-12. And we have this Chinese general, General Lo, the first Chinese general ever, And so he came in, and so my job was to do financial analysis to determine how much budget we're going to need to support 16,000 employees on base, and which organization is going to get so much money, So that was kind of important. So you have to do a lot of analysis, and then you have to present it, to all the bosses. And everybody, of course, is fighting over the money, So you have to kind of know what you're going to be talking about. So the guy that I was working for got sick. So I got lucky. So I got into a position and I got a promotion out of that GS-11. But then I had to go out to do a presentation. And so the first presentation I gave was this Chinese general. And I'm going like, whoa, that's our new boss. And as soon as I opened my mouth with my broken English, what he did was, instead of trying to ask me about what I was presenting, he was my accent. Yeah. And the guy my God, he has much, much heavier accent than me, that you kind of have to listen carefully about what he has to say before we understand him. But, that was a horrible experience, like, my God, and I thought like, well, you're Chinese and I'm Chinese, so you ought to really be helping me rather than criticizing me. Mm-hmm. So as a result of it, that wasn't a very good experience. I was reassigned, about 3 months after that. But there's opportunity. But the funny story, and I'm concluding that relationship, was he eventually retired and became the chairman of SMUD, which is the local utility company who is responsible for the nuclear plants. And I was doing some on-the-side consultant work to do evaluation of the guard for the nuclear plant. And I got to do a psychological evaluation as I was part of that. So somehow I had to go to his office, and I didn't realize he was there. And I go, oh my God, there's General, oh my God. And then the funny thing about it was, he looked at me, he says, wow, your English got really, really good. I'm proud of you. So that was my relationship with him.
Well, we plan on doing another talk with Nancy, looking specifically at a woman's place in corporate America. And we were talking to Adam this evening at dinner, and we were planning on setting that up soon.
Yeah,
so
in a couple of weeks, I guess.
So, but in lieu of going, because it could take all night if we were going to talk about that in depth right now.
Right.
So we're going to go on, and hopefully you can join us another night or another afternoon to listen more about her role as a woman in corporate America.
Yes.
So just to wrap that up, can you just give us a short sort of 1-2 line synopsis of how corporate life informed your life today?
Okay, so the corporate life, of course, you hear quite a lot, right? So being a woman of color and being a non-trained engineer, but yet I was managing about 700 engineers of various sort in very big corporation where there's billions and billions of dollars of revenue every year that I had to generate from my business unit. So it was pretty difficult. I mean, there's a lot of politics, the higher you get, the ranking wise, the more politics you have to play. And then you have all these employees to take care of. And so promotion is becoming somewhat a competition, between all the different people. So it was pretty tough. And then if you want to talk about sexual harassment or discrimination, yeah, we may have done it, right? And so it's just another, I think, is a subject itself to be worthy of talked about, is about women in a corporation. And of course, I have to say, there's not any fault of any man, because I say any story that a woman has, a man also has a story. And I have to thank my coworkers. I had excellent team who are engineers who have taught me everything there is about engineering, about airplane design. And they were my best partners. And they were men. And I had many male bosses also are my best mentors. So I can say that that I did not benefit, because I did have a lot of wonderful bosses who are male. But unfortunately, in corporate America, there's also a lot of sexual harassment, and there's also a lot of discrimination, But they're good at correcting it, I just like example. I was managing 700 some people. My counterpart on the West Coast in California was managing 400 some people. Yet he was making $50,000 a year more than I did. And the bonus point was he was getting 5, which is the maximum, and I was getting 3, right? And so you say that in equity, so how do you deal with that? And I think it's a session itself that I think we can talk about in terms of how you deal with that situation. You can get angry, you can say, I will sue you, but where are you going to get to? So I think it's a matter of how do we formulate ourselves in terms of strategy and how to handle the situation that will be more effectively. So I think that's the session.
Right. So we've gone from childhood, junior high school, college, professional life. And now let's talk about when you grew up, Nancy.
74.
Right now that you've grown up.
Yeah.
So that obviously writing this book has been a process for you. And we had spoken about a passage on chapter 75. And I wonder if you wouldn't read that to us now, and then let's discuss it.
Yes. And then we'll probably open up.
And then we'll open up for some questions.
So, I mean, this book has been in progress for over a decade. And at first, I was just going to write a book. It's my legacy for my family. But it just turns out that through the whole process, I feel like the healing process, that my story is not unique in any way, because there are many young girls and women who have gone through similar type of experiences, maybe in a different setting, but have similar experiences. And I'm just very fortunate that I'm able to tell my story. And I want this to be a way of helping other young girls or women who either can't tell their own story or afraid to, and I want to be their voice. And that's kind of how this is all about. And so I will read this. It's a little bit longer than what I read before, but this chapter is chapter 75 on healing. As my life flourished in New York, the trauma of my past that were buried under the demands of work and family started to surface. I was unclear if it was the pressure from my demanding job or being a mother and wife, or the combination of all of this that broke the wall on my emotional dam. My suppressed childhood trauma was slowly bubbling up from the dark waters. Perhaps it was a feeling of wanting to be free that intensified my needs to heal. I had my second emotional breakdown when our two children were in the middle school. Unlike my nervous breakdown in Davis, this time my actions were laced with depression that were often accompanied by episodes of forceful, angry screams. I felt as though the grievances that I had stored in 1,000 layers of water and clouds were bursting and wanting to be heard. It was painful and often ugly. The voices in my head plead for help, yet I was reluctant to reach out. Instead, I started to write. I remember the girl who likes to dream, the middle schooler who wrote a story about healthful life in Taiwan. The memory of the little girl with the red rolled pantsuit that had happened to her appeared more clearly than before. As I broke down a wet late one night, I heard Grandma Chen whisper in my ear. I opened my laptop and started to write. I needed to see my life written in black and white to be sure that all I knew was real. It would be a self-dialogue of truth in a one-woman show. So I worked, brushed away my sorrow, and left my depression by escaping into my writing for the next 2 years. I recalled a statement I made to myself a while back. Childhood trauma does not go away by itself. One needs to be determined to work on it. My clinical training told me I needed to tame the wild ghost that had been roaming in my soul. Writing my story was not enough to fight the forces that were stronger than I had expected. I really needed the help. I reminded myself with a referral from a very good friend. I connected with a remarkable clinical psychologist. My work with Melissa started with intense individual therapy section. It was followed by my husband joining me for couple work. Eventually, our two children joined to help their mother heal as well, and at the same time, better the quality of their lives. The work continued for nearly 4 years. My husband and children played an important role in my healing. There was no doubt that my deep-rooted trauma had impacted me as a wife and a mother. As a family, we struggled to find footing in a normal life. I worked hard to provide a framework for what a good family might look like. The near picture perfect life of Bill's family, which is not a family because I have to read in the book, came to mind, yet there were so many more to learn. So I took hints from self-help books and copied what I saw was best practice among friends and other families. The emotional neglect that I suffered from childhood to young adulthood lingered. My children, in some way, my husband too, were the unfortunate recipient of my inability to provide. Through the many hours we spent in therapy, one thing became clear. There's a lot of love in our family. I have the deepest belief that love will carry us through the remainder of our lives together. So far, our life has progressed as many other lives have throughout history. Both our children live away from home while attending college. They came home during the holidays and school breaks. We visited them on their campuses frequently. Upon graduation, Ashley went to Chicago and worked at the Melville Lombard Theological School for 3 years before she went to Chiang Mai, Thailand, to study holistic health and healing. Under the guidance of a Chinese doctor teacher, she practiced medical qigong, trained students, and treated patients across the globe. Robert started his professional life in Manhattan, New York, and eventually moved to San Francisco as a member of the software startup community. He's grounded and very successful in what he does. The bond between the brothers and sisters runs deep. Even with thousands of miles between them, our two children are connected like strong string, tying an unbreakable knot. The memory of my first child came to me after Robert and Ashley graduated from college. I had a miscarriage way back. So the memory of my first child came to me after Robert and Ashley graduated from college and went out on their own. It's unclear to me how it came about, but I recall my grieving followed by many months afterward. The delayed reaction to the loss intensified as I felt the guilt of abandoning the child that I did not get to know, who did not even have a name. I finally told my daughter Ashley a few years ago about her sibling. It was through her recognition of being my third child that I was able to reconcile with my guilt. Alas, my first child has a place in our family altar. In a Buddhist way, his or her soul have finally rightfully been claimed.
And thank you for bringing your life to us and sharing. We can now open up to questions.
Sorry. That's right.
Thank you for watching 20 minutes to get here. Sorry, timer. Peace was Nancy. It's going to be about sharing to me, seeing this, in the first. So, the document that item. The insurance agent. And I need to change the song. The council's the one thing. They must see the journey. How would they teach the pace? The patient. The idea that when you go to the kind of a lot happen to it, you cannot see going in. Gradually count myself by saying, need and not damage you if I behavior to however may the department may however see you change yet. I keep that space is still behind for it. Not that they don't know single voice, but to be chilling and see how to keep that pace.
How do I keep the patient? I think it's not so much a patient in a sense. I would say that it's more the desire to live. It's like it's the same kind of thing, right? Like if you want to live or you want to die, And what's unique about my situation was that I don't know if it's good fortune or not, but at 5 years old, I was able to make the decision whether or not I was going to live or die. So I think it's more of a courage and pride to kind of get me going. I'm going to show you, and I have to be very honest about being Taiwan. It's a bittersweet experience for me right now. I came home 6-7 years ago from my birth family. It was sweetness, right? It's a bittersweet type of feeling. In a way, I want to say, I'm here and I'm going to prove to you, see, I'm worthy. You abandoned me as a society where I felt during the 9 years of my time of 5 to 9, I really did not feel I was accepted by the Taiwanese community. Neither was I accepted by the American community, society, community, because on one hand, we're too shameful to know, to show my face because of my mother's profession. And on the other hand, the Americans, they have no idea who I was. We don't want to see the child. So it's kind of like more of a courage, I think, and more of a pride. I want to show you. And I think that's kind of keep my fire kind of going, And I'm not saying it's perfect because I broke down quite a few times. So my likes,
one thing I was very challenged by is you haven't addressed it at all, but it should call on its all like ethnicity. One of the things I noticed very commonly about it's how Taiwan is very broken down into different communities. And the other thing that I realized is that if you're a Taiwanese, you own so Taiwanese mothers. And that if you are from China, you like very good tracks of the French wine, the job is almost. most people projected from the state neighboring only. And then the Taiwanese were kind of expected to learn and they kept forcing them in. But you don't cover that all. And I don't know what, I still don't use that sure about this is your family sure about habits. It's coffee at the thing Taiwanese, you see what your next family was, I think it wasn't out yet, and they were partners, so they were all certainly Taiwanese, but I don't know those things. You have to think that.
Okay, so yeah, I speak both. I speak Taiwanese as well as Mandarin, right? My family, both families speak Taiwanese, but I went to school up to junior high school. I learned Mandarin, And I think that the way I see our current society in Taiwan is I think both languages being spoken here. Yes, it's it's just like any country, any other country in the world, any society in the world. Just like I said before, when I went to the United States, what Constant was asking me about the uniqueness of me as an immigrant into United States, and I mentioned about if you were Hispanic, you go to the Hispanic community. If you were Jewish, you go to there. And if you're Muslim, you go to the Muslim community, and that's the way it is. And I think Taiwan is no different, right? They kind of fit into where they be. If they were mainland China, they have friends and family. They kind of stay together. And as you know, or you may not know, in Taiwanese culture, I think is goodness that most of the friendship started from very young. And if you're a Taiwanese friend, or even people from mainland China, most of their group and their friends are all the way from their childhood and high school and school all the way through. And, and they always function mostly in groups, right? You have hiking groups, you have golf groups, you have tennis group, and you have that kind of community, right? And I think some of them, I don't see this group distinguish themselves from different languages. Yeah, I don't think so.
If you look at the political part, the DPP is about almost 70% of this. Their support is almost entirely Taiwanese. And you look at KFT, like people from White House, they're almost entirely Kenyan. In the United States, we had some kind of parallel with this. A lot of people that were at one time entirely Republican, now primarily Democrat. But you could tell that this is not what happens with Taiwan by the political debate, and they'll fetch it out. Because if you're deep back like on it, since you were let out when you were 14, perhaps you didn't see that, you have to get the background. With I think in Taiwan, most people like that they bet and look inside.
Yeah, I think so. And if you read my book, I think there's a couple chapters that talks about that. Yeah.
Other questions?
Oh, I think it worked.
Okay.
I'm not very familiar about Taiwan, Korea, but I wonder when you were quiet and you were old, what company paid you that I don't know, probably I understood that your product is like they needed the money. Was that something normal that they buy and sell it? When you talk about that truth about your relation with your new mother, it doesn't really seem to me that she really wanted to. So I wonder, it's like, why did this business happen?
I understand your question. So a little history, right? 1949, after the World War II, right? Japanese lost. So Taiwan was under the colonizations of Japanese for 50 years. So after the war in 1949, they went home. They had to go back to Japan. And then, of course, the KMT, what Duncan was talking about, came from mainland China. And we settled here in Taiwan. And that's when the Americans moved in under the peace treaties to sort of help them to protect Taiwan, right? Now, in terms of the culture, it's nothing new about a woman child or a young girl being sold or being given away is really not anything new, because, and I would say it's the same thing for the male. Like, you know, in a book, it will tell you, like my family, they have 6 siblings, but it was divided up, you know. 4 brothers went to the grandmother's side, the maternal grandmother's side, and my father and one other brother stay in the paternal side because of the labor, sharing of the labor, right? And so they have 2 different, they are brothers, but they have two different last names because of 2 different family. So, and it's always, you know, in my family, it was considered an honor to be able to help your uncles and aunts to be able to farm their portion of the farm. So that's nothing new, you know. But a female child, I mean, most often during, you know, the history of China or in Southeast Asia, in Taiwan, is a female child can be given away. They can be sold. They can be given away at birth. A lot of time, people were sold at birth, you know, given away at birth. So it's nothing unique about that.
And the book not prolific.
It's really not a business, but they don't sell female child away of the business. You know, most often is that either the family don't have enough money, you know, so they have to kind of, either they don't have enough money to feed another mouth, so they give it away, or they need the money to you know, to help the family. So there's really nothing unique about me being sold. The only thing that is unique, in my view, was that at my age, I was 5 years old, and I was dressed up like a doll, almost like a child bride sort of thing, and I witnessed the whole transaction. And so from the trauma or the emotional aspect of it, I really suffer from that. Right. And so the culturally is nothing new. And it's not a form of business. It's not like, you know, like, I mean, we Westerner would often like to think is a form of slavery, you know, or, you know, like Africa, you auction off, you know, people. It's not quite like that, but it's not unusual. It's a common, I think it was a common practice, yeah, to give away. And I can only speak for my, it was in a sense that I was actually present when that transaction took place. And that really from a psychological perspective, the emotional trauma that created was a lot longer, long-lasting. And the other thing is, if I were, and I often say this, if I were in Taiwan and marry a Taiwanese, never gone abroad, that would be just the way it is. That's just like, what are you complaining about? A lot of my Taiwanese friends and my family would tell me that, that's just the way it is. What are you worried? What are you complaining, right? But I mean, yeah, they're right. But fortunately or unfortunately, I went to United States where we have a completely different way of viewing things, you know, and I had an opportunity to kind of process through it. Yeah.
Did you remember when you were at the teenage stage and you teenagers all into the red with a foul? You never do it, mother. It's like, why did you get me? It's like, if you don't spend time with me, if you begin killing, you're not, you never, like, started to hash, like, a rebel.
Yeah. So, yes, I understand your question. I think that what she was asking me is when I was in school, when I was in the United States, why didn't I ask the question? Why didn't I question it?
Did you never ask, oh, it's wrong forever?
No, well, the best answer I can give you is that I was too busy trying to survive. I was just trying to live. You know, that's number one. Number two, I never really lived with her. We never really had that relationship. Right? So why is this woman, why am I gonna get out of her, right? I mean, so it's like that. And whether I'm good, bad, and indifferent, that's what it was. And yeah, you're right. I should have been able to ask that. If we were Westerner, in a way that we think probably would be the way to go. But unfortunately, I did not. So it delayed my trauma, right? It delayed my trauma to a much later year. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a question over here.
Yes.
Would you like the mic?
All right, Tony. Thank you for coming.
I'm kind of question my son caught it over the because I need my grades. He said partly and I also it is a job but I like passion for it and the same in the situation. If she thinks we had to our whole community and then just all I'm not seeing but that how target she was body with she in the same party they love they she very abusive on the top how always that straight try people really have a relationship with
How do I?
how you forget someone clean like this so
Well, so is kind of compassion in some way, and is the realizations of culture, right? I mean, Taiwanese culture. I don't know about those. You folks in Taiwan. The Taiwanese culture is such that you respect your parents. You never question what they do or what they say. Nowadays, maybe the younger generation start doing that and they sort of say, okay, if I don't, I like what I hear, I just go away. The value has changed quite a bit in Taiwan, I think, in my observation. And I'm not criticizing it. I think that's just the way the culture is. And I think during that period of time, we don't criticize our parents. We don't ask because that's just the way it is. And I think that at a point I was angry with her quite a lot. I mean, this is my 50th version of that my journal. If you read the earlier book, I was very, very angry toward her, right? How dare you do that to me or something like that. But then over the years, we really didn't have a lot of conversation because we couldn't communicate in that way and there was no attachment to each other. But I think toward the end, as I resolve myself, as I work through it, and I starting to kind of see her point of view. Okay, so I'm going to say the next book I'm writing is called Grace, the Substitute Wife. And the book I'm writing out is about grace. Thinking about a young girl who is 16, 17 years old, sacrificing your own body as a sex worker to earn money to support your family. Psychologically, she was so damaged. She never recovered. And I really feel sorry for her in that sense. I had the opportunity to work through my traumas, but she never ever had an opportunity to do that, So I kind of have to forgive and really try to understand. And I think that's why I dedicated this book to her, because I think that, and somebody asked me a question, how could be somebody like that, like abusive and not treating me well and all that stuff, suddenly she become your hero, And I think that's part of a process that we go through in terms of healing and try to understand, And then once I do that, I think, I'm beginning to understand. And I've been doing quite a lot of research on the subject of sex workers, how that's work and how do they feel. And I'm actually doing my last stage of research on her earlier life. And so it'll be a historical fiction. I'll be writing about her. But I don't know if that answers your question. But it's a part of, it's really more about me, about how I process the forgiveness. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious if you said if you were writing the book, as a way to feel with the process. When did you start considering sharing it, and what was that process like for you? What what song did you think that would say?
Yes, that's a good question. Like I said, I start journaling, as part of my healing process. And my therapist, first therapist started to get me to do journaling. And I think it was about 12, 13 years ago, a very good friend of mine, Linda Andrews, and she's the wife of my minister at my congregation. And so she said, you really need to put you really need to put your story in a book. At the time, I did not feel quite right. I feel shameful. How could I share all this tragedy? How could I share about my trauma? I haven't even worked through it yet, So I was really reluctant to do that. So the book was in kind of form, different shapes and all that stuff for about 12, 13 years. And I think it was until probably about 2, 3 years ago, COVID, right? We all get stuck to COVID in our life, how much our life changed during COVID. And so as I got older, and I just felt like, okay, I'm done. I'm really done. This is 73 years of my life, not quite, because the ending is not quite 73 years, but I just feel like I have like a full circle. And I feel such an urgency to push it out, to become my legacy for my generation, for my own family. And that's the reason why I push it to publish it last September 2023. And anyway, so I was done. I was really done. But fortunately, I guess life kind of take a spin. So somebody asked if he can write a book review about my book. Didn't know who he was. And he wrote a book review for Taipei Times. And then he started comparing me with Amy Tang, which is a very famous worker. And he called me the 5th member of a Joy Luck Club. And as a result of it, I started getting a whole bunch of phone calls, whole bunch of emails. And so at that time, I feel like, oh my God, here comes. I'm going to live again, right? My life is like a second birth, second chance in life type of thing. And of course, my personal life had changed quite a bit in the last few years. So it was like that. So I was going to give up everything that done, far away. And then the book review came out, and then everything just got going. And then finally that through all the different processes of talking to different people, and they are right. They say, this is not only your story, Nancy. It's a lot of story of young girls. Why would you want to just put in the shelf? Why not just be the advocate and be the spokesman for these people that may not have a voice? And so through months of kind of deliberation in my mind, and I'm saying, I guess they are right. So I had to make a choice in terms of what I do with it. And meeting you folks gave me a lot of motivation, and meeting a lot of wonderful friends here, like Romas and Tony. She's my social media manager over there, and of course Miranda, and then I joined the Rotary Club, and then people started to get me to go and speak as keynote speakers here and there, and I just at this moment I feel like I think I like to be an advocate for women who have no voices. So it's really no longer my story. And so we'll see how long that lasts.
But again, how you like to tell on those have been this into society and conversations, how you books and how the thing they were able to kind these, I especially calling US will see it. Now to time on that line so the day had the big things if you are having and speak your team. But I just think that I have maybe at West Oranges, the ads in the ice and baking. Also, my hands ended up in seeing Taiwanese cup.
Yes, the work is kind of been explored to translate the book into Chinese, and of course, what I understand, and I gone to book fairs and stuff, I'm talking to people, Taiwanese writers and stuff, is that I sort of have to almost edit and rewrite the book in a way that is more culturally friendly so that they would be more understanding of what I'm trying to do and say. And now that I'm being inducted to several women's clubs, sort of, they are encouraging me to do that. And of course, in a book like this, you kind of have to, I'm only like 70-80% Chinese proficiency, so I cannot really translate this on my own. But when you want to engage somebody to do that, you almost have to trust them because it's such an emotional book. And you kind of have to, so I haven't found that person yet to connect. I'm almost there, though. Okay, thank you. Yes?
Did you and movie connect with your birth family?
Yes, I did. So 6 years ago, I found my birth family. And then, of course, because we got stuck during COVID, almost 3 years, so I had opportunity to kind of be with them more often. I actually was very fortunate to be able to spend some time with my birth mother. My birth father died like 20, 30 years ago. So, I mean, that's another issue to work, right? The romanticization of my father, Yeah. Anyway, so I was able to spend some time with my birth mother. But she said, Tony, I'm sorry to tell you, my birth mother never apologized, ever. Even her last breath, she never really apologized, But we did talk about it. We were able to talk about it. It took me a while for her to admit what happened. And I think that was good enough for me. And I had 7 other siblings, brothers and sisters. And we're pretty good. We kind of have family gatherings and stuff like that. But unfortunately, I have to say, is like, and it's a reality of thing I think every one of us have to face, I mean, they spend all their lives together. My younger sister is 58, 56 or 58. And, I'm number 2, And they spend all their lives together. They was a family unit. So when I come back, it's like, I'm a guest. So they treat me like guest because I have a complete different view of the world. So a lot of time we're kind of lost in translation kind of thing. But we're still very friendly to each other, but can I ever be fully integrated into the family? Probably not. Yeah. But I'm blessed to know them, yeah. Yes.
So she's a component back on. I did not understand so it was the text to the memories of the then but that shine. And it was also given